Good morning, everybody. I would like to call this virtual meeting of Heritage Oakville to order. It's nice to see everybody and nice to see Jerry calling in from Chile. I guess it's autumn there, but whatever it is, I'm sure it's beautiful. I'd hoped there would be a lovely view or a nice scene, but all I've got is the standard room. Anyway, we are meeting today virtually again, and anyone who is watching the live stream and doesn't have a copy of the agenda, they can get that by going to oakville.ca, and it's much easier to navigate these days, and you can find under meetings and materials that you will be able to get our agenda. We will be taking delegations virtually also, and we have one registered delegation, but anyone who wishes to participate in the meeting as a delegate during the course of the meeting may do so by calling 905-815-6095, and they will be connected to the meeting. And I'd like to thank the staff again, particularly the technical people who will be helping us to manage this scene for us. We have 3 discussion items today and 2 information items, and I'll just remind everybody that we are an advisory committee, that we make recommendations rather than decisions, and our recommendations go to the Planning and Development Committee at its meeting on the 8th of April 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Anyone wishing to delegate at that meeting should do so probably on the Friday before by noon, letting the clerk know that they intend to delegate. So do we have any regrets for today's meetings, Madam Secretary?
We do, Mr. Chair. We have Russell Buckland and Councillor Giddings.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Nope, seeing none, we'll move on.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I've got my hand up. Councillor McNeese?
Yes.
I just want to declare conflict for 4.3, the Heritage Grant Evaluation Work Group, as my wife and I have applied to the program this year for our primary residence, which has a heritage designation under Part 4.
I think that conflict will probably be met by you not being participant in the working group.
Yes, I'll virtually step away for that portion.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And just to remind you again, and thank you, Jonathan, for doing that, when you want to speak, let me know by putting your yellow hand up or waving or otherwise trying to attract my attention. Stay muted until it is your opportunity to speak, and then when you're finished, mute yourself again. We remember that from COVID times, I'm sure. Okay, so the next item then is the confirmation of the minutes of our previous meeting. These were circulated. Are there any comments? Would somebody give me a motion to approve these minutes? Thank you, Bob. I'm guessing your yellow hand up there is doing that. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on that? Is anyone opposed to that? The minutes are approved. So our first discussion item is item 4.1, which is a heritage permit application with respect to 262 King Street. And I think that is Sue. So I'll hand it over to her. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just ask that the presentation be pulled up. And I will be actually your heritage planner for all 3 of our discussion items today, just to make it easy on everyone. So the presentation slides will be showing up momentarily so that I can take you through, excellent, the heritage permit application for 262 King Street. And just one more second while they get us fully into the slideshow. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So our first item here, as the chair has mentioned, is a heritage permit application for 262 King Street. Next slide, please. 262 King Street is a property within the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. It is located on the south side of King Street in between Dunn Street and Trafalgar Road. And it contains a historic former coach house Next slide, please. So as I noted, it was constructed circa 1892 for the Marlett House, which is actually located at 43 Dunn Street. Later on, it converted to residential use and became known as the MS Calverley Studio, was used as apartments, and was actually the subject of a significant heritage permit renovation probably about 5 to 7 years ago. That this Heritage Committee saw in order to bring it up to a single family residential home as it had previously been used as apartments. The property is identified as a contributing or a historic property within the Heritage Conservation District boundaries. The application we're looking at today is to construct a 2-story addition on the west elevation of the existing residence. I'd just like to point out that there is an error in the staff report. It does identify that the proposed cladding for the new addition is, I state in my report that it's stucco and half timbering. It is actually board and batten as noted on the drawings. So I just want to call everyone's attention to that correction. And when we were undertaking our evaluation, we were actually using both the old 1981 Heritage Conservation District plan. This property is part of Block 13 in that plan, but we've also brought in the new policies that were adopted in the Heritage District study, the revised study that we just approved a few months ago, which shows it as part of Area 4, which is the mixed residential development pattern. And while we don't have the new guidelines and plan in place, I did feel it's important to start bringing what we can from those new documents into our review. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly take you through some of the drawings that are included in your application package. What you're looking at here is a site plan of the property, so you can see the subject property with the outline of its neighbor to the immediate east, as well as the driveway that leads to 260 King Street, which is a flag lot immediately behind 262 King Street. I guess it's worth noting that on the original historic 1830s plan of Oakville, 262 and 260 King Street were separate lots, but they had been essentially joined together for many years as Front Street hadn't actually continued across the lakeshore. And so this severance was approved probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that. And then next to the driveway, of course, is the corner of the garage for the property to the west. For our subject property, you can see clearly the outline of the existing 2-story stucco dwelling and the outline of the floor area of our proposed 2-story addition. Next slide, please. Okay, so the drawing package that's being provided by the applicant, I think, is actually quite helpful because it includes both the existing elevation and then the proposed elevation on the papers right in front of you, or the screen right in front of you, so that you can see where the changes are proposed and how they have an overall impact on the character of the heritage building. And so what we are looking at is that addition to the west side of the building, clad in board and batten, not in the stucco and false half timbering that the rest of the original structure is. There have been a number of design considerations for this particular addition to try to make it very compatible with the existing heritage building, but also to slightly differentiate it. Part of the character of the existing structure is this rather asymmetrical, arts and crafts inspired structure. And so we have done our best to not create a completely symmetrical addition, but to still, appreciate the slight asymmetrical shape of the building, while providing the needed space that is the intention of this addition, which is essentially to ensure that the property owners can age in place in this property by providing both a main floor and an upstairs that is fully wheelchair accessible. You may recall an earlier heritage permit just last year for the elevator addition on the east side of the property. It's that small protrusion you can see on your screen there, which has been constructed. Next slide, please. So here you can again see this is the rear elevation of the property. So this is what actually the rear neighbors at 260 King Street would see. Again, you can see the board and batten addition. The roof will be clad in cedar shingles to match. We have ensured that the roof line of the addition is slightly lower than the main house, again, to ensure that there is a clear and definite separation between the addition and the proposed addition while still remaining very compatible in nature. Next slide, please. And so here we're looking at the west addition. And so this is the elevation that will actually have the most significant changes, as the existing two dormers on the roofs will have to be removed in order to facilitate the construction of the addition. If possible, the windows on this elevation may be reused in the addition itself, depending on the condition when they are removed. And so you can see that there is actually a new entrance being proposed on the ground floor to provide entrance directly into the addition in case it is used as living quarters for live-in medical help in the future. Next slide, please. And we haven't looked at the east elevation because there are no proposed changes at all. And so what we're looking at here are some 3D renderings of the existing house with the proposed addition. So you can see that from several different angles. The dormer on the second story of the proposed addition has been specifically designed as a gable shape, which matches the pitch of the central portion where the garage doors are now, which were originally barn doors. We had actually looked at that as a shed dormer to match on the what was existing on the existing house, and we decided to again ensure that there's a difference yet compatibility to this side to make it very clear that this was not always part of the house, but it is a compatible part of the house as it is renovated. And you can actually see in the lower photos that the addition is pushed back from that front plane of the garage wall as well, to ensure that it is a separate and distinct addition to the building. Next slide, please. This is actually quite a lovely rendering that the applicants had done up of the proposed addition so that you can see how that it fits into the streetscape. And I've actually just included a streetscape shot underneath so that you can see the general change in the building shape from what is being proposed. Next slide, please. And so a number of you joined us on the site visit that was held last fall for this property. At that time, we were looking at a fairly significantly different design, and I'm pleased to say that the applicant has been very responsive to feedback provided by both the Heritage Committee members who attended that site visit and to staff in order to come up with a design that we feel is appropriate for the character of the house itself, as well as the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. So what we can see here is the upper photo is the front of the house, the lower photo is the rear of the house. Next slide. And this, of course, is the the west elevation, which will have the most significant changes made to it. I would note that actually most of these windows are already replacement windows, as they were approved through the heritage permit that brought the house from an apartment use into a single family residence. So these windows themselves are actually modern replacement windows that are done to a very high standard. They are excellent windows. And as I noted earlier, they will be reused if they are in sufficient shape when they're removed from the original settings. Next slide, please. And so, as always, we complete a thorough heritage assessment based on the existing policy framework that we have, which is essentially our 1981 Heritage Conservation District Plan. Staff have found that the scale, massing, and height of the proposed addition is compatible with the historic structure as it's pushed back from the front plane of the building with a slightly lower roof line. The detailing that's being provided, such as the dormer window and the side gable roof, are slightly different than the historic house, but still in keeping with the arts and crafts aesthetic of the historic structure. And while we certainly do note that the addition will require the removal of some of the historic features on the west elevation of the existing residence, we feel that the aesthetic of the new addition and the materials that have been selected are both compatible and will unify quite well with the existing house, while still remaining a distinctly separate addition. We found that the proposed addition does not negatively impact the varied streetscape, the character of this section of King Street. The staff report contains quite a bit of information regarding the block analysis. As I noted, this is part of Block 13 in the original Heritage Conservation District Plan. And as well, you will note as part of your package, there are a number of letters of support that have been provided from neighbors around this property. Our revised agenda, I believe, also included some additional letters that came in after the application was submitted to staff as well. And so the applicant has certainly taken the time to reach out to surrounding members of his community to ensure that they're comfortable with the changes in relation to their own properties within the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. And so staff's recommendation is for the approval of the two-story addition as attached in Appendix B. And so that's, of course, with the drawings that clearly note the addition is board and batten, not stucco and false half timbering. But those our usual caveat that the final details on the windows, doors, trim, and cladding materials, paint colors be submitted to Heritage Planning staff for final approval to ensure that we're making sure that all those little loopholes are tidied up and everything is appropriate in accordance with the standards of our Heritage Conservation District Plan, and that the heritage permit expired 2 years from the date of final approval. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have, and I believe that the applicant is here online with us as well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Sue. A good, clear presentation as always. You mentioned the lot to the south needing the flagstaff because the access to Front Street wasn't completed. I believe we lost Front Street. The Front Street used to run along there, but erosion over time, that part of Front Street, in fact, disappeared. So,
you are right, Mr. Chair. It is in the water.
Yeah, it's in the water. It's good to notice that you're using the approved district plan and the proposed guidelines. It gives you a way to test in real life some of the changes that are being made and to see how effective they are. So I think that's good to notice. I noticed that in the new edition, in the comment section, where you mentioned the half timber, false half timber. In England, we call that well, it's Tudor is the style, and of course there were real Tudor buildings around. So the modern version was called mock Tudor. So false half timbering sounds, I don't know if it sounds better than mock Tudor or not, but I noticed that a single man door is approved, is proposed. Does that suggest restricting access to only single men?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that is simply the terminology that is used to describe the size of the door, just to differentiate from the garage doors that it is next to, and that it is a single door opening.
Okay, good.
For a human-sized person.
I'm pleased to hear that, because it would restrict certainly the staff that Clive could hire in his to help him. And the letters of support you mentioned, these were in your original package, and a supplementary package was emailed to you that included additional letters of support that Clive has got from the community. Good. Any questions of Sue? Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies for the bland white background. I will send you some photos of the temperate rainforest, I promise. I have to say it's a very impressive rigor in developed sketches and proposal, and also in getting the neighbors on board. Very nicely done. I wanted to ask Sue, I know I've asked this before, were there some quick option sketches provided to see how the tower element and the roof, the hip roof could have been enhanced versus having a gable form, keeping the modest vernacular in detail? I think two elements still appear to be a tad awkward. That may require some more massaging, in my opinion, only. The gable ending and the dormers on the west end. The existing west end has long, very elegant dormers that begin just short of the roof ridge, and they are a very beautiful element in seeing the experience of the home, especially from the west end. The gable ending versus versus the hip roof terminus. And on the north elevation, the new dormer, the gable dormer, doesn't look quite comfortable on the facade, and I think it's competing with that gable, the entry gable. Whereas I think the existing form sets up an interplay of balance and proportion nicely. I don't think the new addition does that quite well. I think there's something off in the balance, and that's my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So
Thank
the
you,
worst,
Chair.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I just may note that we actually, we being myself and the applicant, Mr. Clive Mail, ran through, gosh, probably about 6 or 7 different design sketches for this particular structure to arrive at something that didn't create a very, what we were concerned about, I think, was losing the slightly asymmetrical proportions and shape of the original structure by coming up with something that was almost too balanced, that gave it more of more of a classically kind of balanced structure than this very unique arts and crafts with these Tudor revival influences, certainly. One of the reasons why the hip roof didn't work was simply an interior height issue. And given that the whole reason for this particular addition is to ensure that the interior spaces are accessible for wheelchair use and high enough to ensure that you have appropriate medical equipment, beds, lifts, whatever is needed on the inside space. The hip roof didn't work, but we did try it. If the committee feels that a shed dormer is more appropriate on the front elevation, I'm sure that's something that the applicants would take into consideration. It's certainly one of the design iterations that we did look at, and we decided to propose the gable in the same proportions of the main roof. But if there's a strong feeling, I think, by the committee either way on that particular element, I certainly defer to the applicants as they are here, but staff certainly wouldn't be opposed to it.
Good, thanks, Sue. We'll see if that pops up. Jason?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you. Obviously, just picking up on the point of access to the home, and you mentioned the use of wheelchairs and such, does the new doorway provide the appropriate width to access? Is there a ramp provided in? Obviously, if that was considered now, we should make sure that that's an important part of the landscaping of the addition to tie in with the new proposals, and therefore that would allow us to make sure it was appropriate for the persons who are doing the work.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would defer to the applicant just to determine the size of that new access door, but the main entrance to the house is certainly wheelchair accessible, and that's actually the easiest way to get to the elevator to access the second floor as well, as the elevator shaft is on the east elevation of the property. But hopefully the applicants can provide just a little bit of extra clarification about the new door on the west elevation.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Any other questions of Sue? No, good.
Bob, I see Bob's hand up, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
it went up. See, people do that right at the very last minute. Bob, you're on. You better.
It wasn't just at the last minute. You just didn't see it. I must say that when I look at the north elevation, that gable dormer did stand out to me to be somewhat unbalanced. I know you're trying to have it not entirely symmetrical, but I didn't think it was quite as in keeping with what we would want to see in the front as would be a shed dormer that kind of matched the other side. So.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And we'll probably hear from the applicant then on that, since it's been brought up. Okay, anyone else? Anyone else? No, good. Now we do have a registered delegation, Clive and Hilary Mail. I can see a box. I can see that it's unmuted. I don't need to see your pictures, but can you hear us, Clive or Hilary?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know why the picture's not there, actually. I'm not sure why.
But that's okay, as long as we can hear you. So would you like to add anything to Susan's presentation?
Yes, thank you. I think I'd like to spend a moment, it's Hilary, obviously, just to say why, why we're asking. We moved into Old Oakville in 1999. We lived in the Marlett House, actually. Love Old Oakville, was very proud to live there and feel that it's a big privilege living in this area. And the only reason we moved from there is our 3 children, they really unkindly all got married and left home. So we were left living in this huge house by ourselves. So we needed to downsize and moved across the road to King Street a few years ago. And we knew, obviously fairly early, that we would need to apply to put in an elevator because my husband has numerous underlying health conditions and some disabilities. And in fact, we went to Disney with our grandchildren just last week, and he was in a wheelchair the whole week. He can walk, but it's something that comes and goes, and all likelihood is going to become more serious as he ages. So we put in the elevator, and we thought that that would resolve everything. COVID was also a big eye-opener for me, especially because I had a family member who was in a retirement home on the 2nd floor and in lockdown. And so because she was on the 2nd floor, we couldn't even go and say hi, kind of thing. And it caused a serious, well, for sure, depression and mental health issues, and I think precipitated her earlier death. So it was a bit scary for us, knowing my husband's health conditions and requirements. And so we really felt that we really wanted to live out our days in our own home and not go into a home if it was in any way feasible. So we thought by having the elevator, we had resolved all that. And then my sister-in-law came to visit us, and her husband had been in a wheelchair for 20 years after a serious stroke and had recently passed away. And she immediately said to us, guys, this isn't going to work. Yes, you can access the 2nd floor now, but your bedroom and bathroom are not big enough to be able to turn a wheelchair, and most especially get to the toilet or the shower. And, I hadn't personally thought about that. I thought with the elevator, we were okay. So my husband, I think we're going to have these problems going forward with his health and his disabilities. So we need to extend our existing bedroom bathroom so that we can accommodate him and hopefully, live out the rest of our life in our own home. So that's what I wanted to speak to. And Clive is here for all the more construction issues.
Right. So I can answer any questions on that. I really enjoyed working with the committee and staff on this job because I can see that they're really enthused with keeping the look of this whole area, heritage area, and I love it. Obviously, we moved from one heritage house to another across the road, and I care about the look of the house. I think it's very, very important, and so I spent enormous amount of time back and forwards with staff, trying to get the. I say compromise, but it's not so sort of much a compromise. It's the two things we needed to do. One is make the house look like it belonged there, and like the heritage house it is. And the other big problem was making sure there's enough headroom in the bedroom and in the bathroom, because when you have a slope anywhere, and someone's pushing a wheelchair, and if you have to have as well as that, any sort of lifts to lift myself into a bed or into a bath, that needs extra height as well. And all those were taken into consideration. And I thought what we came up with was certainly we've got enough room inside now, but I thought the outside of the house looks fantastic. And in fact, I went round to 19 of the closest neighbours here, so everyone that can see from their house. And I asked them what they thought of it, and everyone thought it looks fantastic. And in fact, 3 of the neighbours said, "Would you like us to go to the meeting and speak up for you, Clive?" And I said, "No, it's kind of you. But no, I think it'll work itself out." And I don't think I'm willing to try it. If someone comes up with a design that matches the height restrictions and makes everyone else happy about the design, I'm willing to change it. But the time I spent on it, I don't think there is any changes that could be made that will, satisfy all of the criteria needed. So thank you for listening, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Clive, and thank you, Hilary, for that. Clive, the business of whether it's a dormer or a gable window that we've got there, with respect to the interior, and you're talking about moving a wheelchair around or having a hoist or something in place, is one window style preferable over the other?
No, it's not. It's not. As long as it gives us the same height that we need.
Yep, I hear that. But your neighbours were in favour of the design as presented to us today.
I'd say more than that. They were delighted. They think it makes the house look better, and they like the downstairs windows, because they said in the last design there was no windows on the front face of the house at all, apart from above, but not on the main level. And the other question that came up, I forgot to answer it. I wouldn't be accessing the downstairs door, the single door, as you put it, because I've got no reason to go in there. I mean, that would be a separate nurses' station, and they could access, and they would access the house through the kitchen.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Right. Any questions for the applicant?
Actually, if I could just add for a moment, I forgot to mention that when I talked to some of the neighbours, when we were showing them the picture, actually a couple of them actually said to us, not only did they prefer the look of it in the presentation, they liked the fact that with those windows, it looked more like a home and not as much as they didn't say industrial, but they said it looked more like a garage. That the house looked more like a garage now, whereas the rendering that we're presenting looks more like a home. And several of the neighbours said that to me, actually.
Good. Thank you, Hilary. Any questions? I don't see any yellow hands. I don't see anybody waving to me. Okay, good. Thank you. Now I should ask the secretary if anyone has been attempting to participate online.
Mr. Chair, I don't have anyone at this moment.
Okay, good. Right, so it's just down to us now. Any discussion now on the application? Jerry and Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that in general, all of the elements of the design are are fine. I think where my point is, there is in the finesse of the detail resolution, it still isn't coming together 100%. Again, only my opinion. The elements of dormer and gable at the end are still a tad awkward in terms of the architectural element of the whole. Without looking at modifying any of the interior space, there are tools within which one can use to bring down the gable so that it doesn't become competitive with the existing entry cable on the north side. So again, these are only opinions, but in general, I think none of the presentation regarding space or quality of space is being questioned. Only some of the finesse in the detail resolution from an architectural standpoint, from a heritage architectural standpoint. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Jerry. Sue.
Okay, just unmuting. I actually like the gable dormer. I like the asymmetry a great deal. I'd sort of, you know, it's up to the owner as far as I'm concerned, whether that's a shed dormer or a gable dormer on the new edition. It's the asymmetry that I like. I think it helps, you know, sort of a quirkiness. It's just my comment. It's personal taste, I suppose, but I do like the presentation as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Brenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. I hear what both Sue and Jerry are saying, and I agree that the front is comments are approaching a matter of taste. My concern is to the west side, just that the expanse of the second floor it has what appears to be a small window relative to the expanse of what will be looks like stucco. So that would be my comment, that we lose the two shed dormers on the west side, and we get one small window. So I find that that's the side where the detailing is lost. It's a little plainer, and it doesn't retain that sort of character and quirkiness that makes the home such a beautiful, charming home. Thank you.
Sue, can you help us on that, or should I ask Clive?
Well, yeah. I'm happy to put a bigger window there. There's maybe better for inside, you know, more light. So I have no objection to that if that's what everyone wants.
Mr. Chair, I mean, I can certainly work on options for increasing the glazing on that elevation as a minor change to the heritage permit, if the committee is comfortable with that. I mean, we can also re-examine the roof system on that front dormer window to just, you know, take a few more quick looks at it to see shed dormer, gable dormer, which works best, as long as the committee is generally okay with either one of them being used. I do think that these are relatively minor issues. If the committee is comfortable with leaving staff to deal with them, we will certainly work with the applicant.
Good, and I think what I'm hearing from everybody is that this is 99% there, and that we're talking about just these final details. And if everyone's happy based on the input that Sue has heard, and Clive and Hillary, that if we can just work out some of those rough edges in the final approval process, then the basic staff recommendation would work. So if that is how people feel, is anybody ready to give me the motion to approve the staff recommendation? Thank you, Brenda. So Brenda had given us the motion to approve the staff recommendation as presented, and we know that Sue will do the magic to just, you know, smooth out the rough edges. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried and the recommendation will go forward to the Planning and Development Committee. Thank you, Clive and Hillary, for participating remotely in our meeting today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, So I noticed that we seem to have lost George, and I know that Natasha's trying to contact him again. We only got sound from him, we didn't get a picture. And no, I don't see him having appeared, but we've still got quorum, so we're still okay. Right, so our next item is item 4.2, notice of intention to designate at 3175 Lakeshore Road West. And as everybody will remember, this is deja vu all over again, because we've seen this, I think, 3 times, and we deferred it a couple of times at the request of the applicant. And we set today's meeting as the day that we would deal with it. So we've got this on the agenda today, and Sue is going to lead us into it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'll ask for the presentation for item 4.2 to be brought up, and I will take you through our proposal. Today I am representing the town's designation project. Carolyn and her team of Kristen and Elaine have many more designations that are in the queue, but aren't maybe 100% ready to come to you, and you'll start seeing more again in April. But for today, we are here to look again at the Cudmore House at 3175 Lakeshore Road West. Next slide, please. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the property, it is located in Bronte. It is on the north side of Lakeshore Road West. Just kind of in between the southern entrances to West Street and to Cudmore Road, familiar name. Next slide, please. I'm just going to take you through a couple of photos of the property. I had the ability to go out and take some photos late last summer. As you can see, the gardens are very much in full bloom. So this is the front of the property. It is somewhat shielded from the street by vegetation, but there's a semicircle driveway there. Next slide, please. These would be the 2 side elevations, so that you can see that the west elevation is relatively untouched. I believe it's the east elevation that has a 1-story enclosed sunroom addition. And you can also see at the in the image, on the left, there is an addition to the back as well, kind of a 1.5-story addition to the rear of the building. Next slide, please. The Cudmore lands are a very interesting history. You have the benefit of having 2 separate heritage reports in the package today. The original Cudmore, land assembly included 47 acres of land. Obviously, there have been multiple severances over the decades. Most of it was cut off to form the residential parcels of land to the north. Most recently, the Cudmore Market lands, which actually I believe were a separate parcel, but they were brought forward for redevelopment, separating them essentially from the house. The Cudmore Markets, I believe, closed in 2019, and so that portion of the original Cudmore lands will now be developed as well. There has also been a minor variance and a consent to sever application submitted for our subject property, which is 3175 Lakeshore Road West. This was submitted to the Committee of Adjustment in 2023, but it was deferred at the September CFA meeting to a future meeting because there were some additional issues that the applicant needed to respond to. And so at this time, it hasn't been brought back yet. And this would essentially sever a portion of the existing lot to create a new developable lot, I believe, that would front onto Victoria Street, which is the street north of Lakeshore Road. Heritage staff have certainly been involved in the review of the consent to sever application and the variances that would be required to support it. And we have made it known that a condition of approval would be the opportunity for council to consider designation. And so we're simply just moving forward with this consideration at this time, even though it hasn't been brought back just yet to the Committee of Adjustment. We didn't want to hold up that future Committee of Adjustment meeting by having to wait for this to come back to the Heritage Committee. Next slide, please. So I would just note that in your agenda package, I believe it's Appendix A is the report that was submitted as part of the consent to sever application. And you can see quite clearly on there the considerations that were given to ensure that there is still enough breathing room around the historic house should that severance eventually be approved. As of now, it is not. But the Heritage Impact Assessment did actually identify 3 criteria in Ontario Regulation 906 that the author felt that the property or historic house met. Heritage planning staff have completed our own research report that has just a few additional details, but essentially agrees with those 3 criteria in the Heritage Impact Assessment, one under each category of the design physical value, historic associative value, and the contextual value. So the property is a representative example of the Dutch colonial revival architectural style that was popular in Ontario in the early to mid 20th century. It has its own little unique elements that have likely been influenced by craftsman design. It is a very unique house in Oakville, and it's certainly a well-known house in the Bronte area. You don't see many examples of this particular type of architectural style or influence in Oakville in general. Of course, the historic value of the property is in association with the Cudmore family, who have owned and resided in this property for over 100 years. William Henry Cudmore built the house himself. He and his family farmed the land and operated several different businesses in and around the residence for a very long time. And they're well-known, prominent, active community members and business owners in Bronte Village and have been for many decades. In terms of contextual value, the property is physically, functionally, visually, and historically linked to its surroundings, both the Lakeshore Road that was constructed in 1915 and the old Lake Road that used to the historic thoroughfare that cut through an earlier evolution of the Cudmore lands. And to 2 centuries of farming on the lands, which, certainly reference Bronte's strong agricultural history. Next slide, please. And so staff's recommendation before you today is that a notice of intention to designate be issued for the Cudmore House. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. The owners have been certainly informed of the staff report. In fact, they've had the opportunity to read the staff report as it was published in October and again November. The only thing that has been changed in the staff report essentially is some updating of the dates. So really it is the same report that we were looking at last year. They did ask for some additional time to respond to that. I'm unsure if they are in attendance at this meeting today, but they were certainly given multiple notifications that the meeting would be happening today, and also that it would then be going to Planning and Development Council for approval to issue that notice of intention to designate on April the 8th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Sue. An excellent presentation as usual, and it's always good to read these and 2 reports too, coming at it from different angles, but giving us the same general message. Are there any questions of Sue? I can see one from Councillor McNeice. Jonathan, off you go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff, Susan, for that excellent presentation. I'm certainly in favor of preserving our history as much as we can in Brawny Village. And I think this is the first designation that we've gotten since the notification that the list is getting torn up at the end of this year. So the appropriate time, I'd be happy to move this. And I think just a question to staff, is there, I think one challenge with this house is it's not very noticeable from the curb. You know, there's a lot of plantings out front and things like that. I'm not sure that those are part of the designation, but is there any opportunity to, I guess, trim back the bushes a little bit so it's a little more prominent and noticeable?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The vegetation is not part of it, has a heritage designation as proposed. And so, yes, it certainly could be. I would note that actually one of the reasons why the application to sever the property has been held up is actually due to issues of preserving mature trees in the backyard. And so I believe town staff has certainly advocated very strongly in favor of preservation. I believe it's a mature oak tree in the rear yard. That just the property lines, I think, need to properly reflect enough room to make sure that it remains healthy and safe during any future development. But it would not remain as part of this parcel of land, is my understanding. And so we haven't proposed any natural heritage features on this lot. It is just the residence.
Okay, thank you. And I did hear from Ms. Cudmore probably about a month ago just about the Committee of Adjustment application and the tree. And it did seem like there may have been a miscommunication between staff and their planning consultant that Ms. Cudmore had retained. So I believe that will be resolved.
I hope so.
Yeah, and I believe that they're in Florida at the time being. So we sort of got some assurances that it could be resolved before Mr. and Mrs. Cudmore left. I'm not sure where they are right now, but she was certainly aware of the heritage designation as well. And I believe that this, I believe it's a severance issue, can be resolved. I think it was to do with retaining an amount on the deed for the tree that's needed to be sorted out. So it sounded like they were aware, and the problem could be solved. And I believe once she's back, it will be solved. So
excellent.
Does that mean, Sue, that that the lot that this house stands on, that would be part of the designation, has that not yet been clearly defined?
The proposed designation right now would apply to the entire lot, so the unsevered lot. However, there are numerous steps in the designation process, as we all know, and we've got quite a ways to go until we come to the passing of an actual final bylaw. And should a consent to sever be approved before the final bylaw is passed, heritage planning staff have absolutely no problem amending that legal description to simply reflect the portion that retains the historic residence. That would certainly be our preferred option.
So there would be enough land, though. There's going to be some breathing room around the designated house.
Certainly, yes, and that's why I really included the heritage impact assessment in as Appendix A, because it does go through some of the alternatives or the original proposal they were looking at for the severance, and then actually the proposal that they ended up moving forward with, which better served the retention of the heritage home with sufficient space around it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yes.
Good.
Heritage planning staff have been completely involved in that process every step of the way, and we have no issues with the proposed severance. Heritage is not holding that process up. It is other issues that they have been working to resolve, and hopefully will have resolved soon.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
And just a follow-up, I believe the severance is just on the rear, is that correct?
It cuts around the diagonal kind of.
Okay, but nothing affecting the front of the property on Lakeshore?
Not significantly, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good.
While the tree is still in on the lot, is there anything we can do to include that in the heritage designation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the severance of the lot does require the land that the tree is on, but it will be protected through the town's private tree bylaw and in its adjacency protections through the Ontario Heritage Act, as it would be adjacent to a designated heritage property. I mean, they're taking all of this time to ensure that the tree would be protected through a severance. But right now, I do believe that land is necessary in order to give it the appropriate frontages and lot area in order to be a developable lot. So I don't think there's the opportunity to include the oak tree on the designated portion in the future, but we will be doing our very best from all different departments to ensure the retention of that mature tree.
Thank you.
Okay. Brenda?
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. Just a question, just to confirm, Sue, when we're talking about what the lot looks like now, are we, or is what will be submitted to the Committee of Adjustment? It is the alternative option listed on page 15 of our, or 67, pardon me, of our report?
Correct. That is what was proposed to the Committee of Adjustment. At the time, it was considered an alternative because the original concept was different, but through the heritage impact assessment that was required for the severance, it was determined that this was a better fit to ensure the heritage conservation needs were being met, as well as creating a lot that would be developable on Victoria Street.
Okay, thank you. And one further question, just to understand the two additions, the one that you highlighted, the sunroom, and then the 1.5 story on the back. Mm-hmm. Are those both part of the designation, or are they more recent additions?
They are definitely more recent additions and would not be included in terms of, I mean, they're on the designated property, but they're not heritage attributes in and of themselves and could certainly be removed. All additions could be put up in their place. You know, obviously we have our heritage permit process in place, but yeah, those two additions are definitely later and do not contribute to the overall cultural heritage value of the property.
Okay, and my last question is just at the on the same page 67 at the very north end of the lot. It's with the red text, the remnant of concrete block foundation. Well, what is that, and what is the plan for that?
That is actually, I believe, on the adjacent parcel. It's not actually on 3175. That was part of the market center garden landscape, and I believe it may already be gone now as part of that particular development proposal.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, good. George, I can see you're trying to get back on. I hope you can hear everything that's going on. Yeah, I can see you now. Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Are there any other questions of Sue from members of the committee? Nope, good. Madam Secretary, has anyone indicated an intention to join us?
Mr. Chair, we have no call-in delegations for this item.
Okay, good, thank you. So that means we can move right now then to consider the recommendation that staff have made. Are there any other comments or points that people wish to raise? Would somebody like to give me a motion? I think Councillor McNeice, you did indicate your intention to do that, and if that's still the case, we'll take that. So the motion has been made by Councillor McNeice that the staff report to recommend to Council that the designation under Part 4 proceed with the notice. Is anyone going to add any comments to that? Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried and it moves forward to Council. And I would just remind anyone who's listening that they ought to indicate to the Planning and Development Council, probably on the Friday before their meeting, their intention to delegate at that meeting. That would be much appreciated by everybody. Okay, good. So the next item is the Heritage Grant Evaluation Working Group, and Councillor McNeice would notice that you're going to just stay silent throughout this. Thank you. Okay, Sue, it's back to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a very, very brief presentation for this one. So if we can have item 4.3 brought up on the screen, I would appreciate it. And I don't think this will take us too long. Okay. So thank you. The photo that we've got here on the screen is actually one of the applicants for this year's program, as the application period has now closed. And we are very busy getting ready to review all of the applications. Next slide, please. The clerk's department this year has requested that we formalize our Heritage Grant Working Group in accordance with the terms of reference for the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee. And so we are happy to make our clerk's department happy. The recommendation before you today is essentially that we create the group and the membership be determined. This membership was determined by a call to members via email. We were informed by the clerk that it should be under quorum. And so the members who have volunteered to review the grant applications for this year are Drew Bucknell, Jerry Tino, David Giddings, Bob Lachlan, and George Gordon. And Sue Hobson has very generously indicated that she will be our alternate member if necessary. If one of our other members cannot make it, we'll give Sue a call and see if she can stand it in place. Next slide, please. And so that is the recommendation before you today. I would just double check with our clerk to ensure that we have now met all of the requirements in order to formalize the Heritage Grant Working Group. Natasha, is there anything else that we need to add?
Thank you, Susan. There isn't at this time. Just in the recommendation, after the membership has been approved, we will add the members' names in the recommendation, just so everyone is aware.
So it would be created with the membership as listed.
If everyone agrees to that, that is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. And I noticed in the working, in our terms of reference, it says membership of a working group will not constitute a quorum of the committee. So I'm not quite sure what that means, but it's not really an issue. It's moot because we don't have more than half of the members participating in the working group. So there we have it. That you've those of you who had indicated your desire to participate have already got a Dropbox thing, and I've opened mine, but it keeps trying to tell me I need to spend money to actually use it. So I'm ignoring that. And just going on to the operators, I guess, or just look at it while you're looking at it, but don't save anything. And I'm sure the others who've got it have had a chance to review it, and I'll let Sue know if they've had any technical issues with it. So there we go. We have a motion now. We've been flying under the radar these many years, but finally the clerk's department has caught up with us. So the recommendation is that the Heritage Grant Evaluation Work Group for 2024 be created and the membership be as listed. And you saw the names on Sue's presentation. Are there any points to be raised? Is there any discussion on that? Would somebody like to give me a motion? Thank you, Kerry. So we have a motion to establish the working group. Is there any further discussion? Anyone opposed to that motion? The motion is carried and the working group is off and running. Thank you very much, everybody. So we have two information items, the Heritage Conservation District update and the designation project update. And as Sue indicated, she's on for that one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Things are proceeding very well with the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District update. We held our public meeting to present the first draft of the plan and guidelines to the public. It has been available online for about 3 to 4 weeks now. We had a really interesting presentation from staff and our consulting team, and that was then followed by also some great discussion from the participants. I think we had between 30 and 40 people attending. We have also been receiving comments in writing via email, which is wonderful. We have asked for comments to be in by this Thursday, March 28th, if possible. I can also report that we had a stakeholder chat with some members of the committee yesterday. That was quite helpful. I took extensive notes. And we have a future chat coming up with the Lakeside Residents Association this week to hear directly from them as well. And I'm always available to anybody else who wants to have a talk or to send me their comments or feedback. The presentation slides from our public meeting should now be available online on the project website. And we are also working at creating a summary of the notes from that public meeting as well that will be eventually posted online too. So things are moving ahead. I am pleased to say that, you know, overall the feedback is very positive. There's definitely ways that we can improve this first draft, which is absolutely wonderful to hear. And I'm looking forward to consolidating all of these suggestions and revisions and then seeing our revised document sometime in the next month or so. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sue. An excellent project all around. So we'll look forward to the final outcome coming down later. So the designation project update?
On behalf of Carolyn, designations are the research is full steam ahead as per usual. As I noted, Cudmore House was the designation for this month, but there should be multiple designation reports for you to review for the upcoming April and May meetings, of course. And so that's the update for today.
Good. Lots of good reading coming our way.
Mm-hmm.
So I need a motion to receive the information items. I think George would like to give me that motion since he managed to get himself connected. Thank you, George. So we have a motion from George to receive the information items. Any discussion on that motion? Anyone opposed to that motion? The motion is passed. The items are received. So the date and time of our next meeting is St. George's Day in 2024, otherwise known as Shakespeare's birthday. And it will be at 9:30. We don't know yet whether it will be in person or whether it will be virtual again, but you'll receive notice well ahead of that time. So if I could have a motion to adjourn. Don't rush. Sue has given me a motion to adjourn. Okay, and there'll be nobody opposed to that motion. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you as always, everyone, for the gift of your time today. Just good discussion. Thank you very much, everybody.